to the show. New episode, new story. Let's begin the journey.
The conference room on level 7 smelled like recycled air and old money. Sarah Chen sat across from Ambassador Volcaris, whose three-part face displayed the chromatic equivalent of boredom. She had studied him for 17 minutes and already knew what he wanted before his translator spoke. "Your species communicates through fractional honesty," Sarah said quietly. "You compartmentalize information across facial regions. The left shows your official position, the center holds your genuine assessment, and the right reveals what you fear." Velkaris' rightmost face flushed purple. The other diplomats stared at the 28-year-old woman with awe and resentment. Her father, Ambassador Marcus Chen, smiled from his seat near the window, a calculated 3-second performance of parental pride. That was 3 months ago. Now, Sarah held a folder in her father's private office that would either save humanity or destroy everything her family had built. They had brought her into the negotiations because she was useful. Sarah's mother had been Javari, one of 7 alien species in the Interstellar Alliance, and her hybrid brain processed synapse psychology the way musicians process symphonies. Within 2 weeks, she had resolved an 18-month dispute by recognizing that a single word in one delegate's opening statement triggered a psychological defense in another species. The media called her a genius. Her father called her a valuable asset. Sarah never noticed anything unusual until she began reading her father's disappeared hours. 3 to 4 hours every second Tuesday weren't listed in the official calendar. Security staff had standing orders not to disturb him. Answers about his whereabouts varied depending on whom she asked: meetings with delegates, reviewing archives, meditating. People don't coordinate lies about meditation. Using contacts she developed, Sarah pulled security footage. Her father entered the restricted 14th sublevel at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. He emerged at 6:15 a.m. The archive required level 2 clearance. Her father had level 1, the highest available, but his name didn't appear in the official access logs. Either the system had malfunctioned, the logs had been falsified, or her father had used credentials that weren't his. Sarah considered each possibility with detached analysis. There was only one logical conclusion. Earth's ambassador was running an unsanctioned operation from inside the highest security diplomatic facilities. She should have reported it immediately. Instead, she broke into his residence and accessed his encrypted files. The first document was dated 12 years before her birth. A recruitment letter from the Terrestrial Continuity Council, promising that her father possessed qualities essential to humanity's long-term survival in a galactic context. The second was a psychological evaluation assessing his capacity for moral flexibility, his ability to compartmentalize conflicting loyalties, his willingness to accept moral complexity as necessary for greater good. The remaining documents were instructions and mission reports spanning decades. Her father had subtly steered negotiations in directions official Earth policy would never authorize. He had assured the Vaur delegation that Earth wouldn't support Krell expansion, preventing what might have become a destabilizing conflict. He had leaked manufacturing data to the Javari, preventing an economic collapse that would have triggered famine affecting 17 million citizens. Each report was clinical, detached, but embedded in their precision was something Sarah recognized in herself: the cold understanding that some truths could only be served by hiding them. She read through the night. At 5:47 a.m., her father came home. He didn't seem surprised to find her in his office. "How long?" she asked. "Since I was 24, he said, pouring a drink. "They approached me when I was idealistic enough to believe I could change the system, but practical enough to recognize the system would never allow it. Earth policy. Earth policy is written by people who don't understand what we're negotiating for." He interrupted. "We're determining whether our species survives the next 200 years. The alliance is held together by fragile balance. If the wrong decision is made, everything collapses. Humans suffer most because we're least established, most expendable. Sarah set down the documents. You decided to be humanity's secret guardian. Without authorization, with the only oversight that matters, her father said. Results. Every decision I've made advanced human interests while maintaining alliance stability. Show me a single outcome that harmed Earth. Sarah's mind moved through the reports, cross-referencing against official records. The data aligned perfectly. Her father's interventions didn't just benefit aliens, they created conditions where Earth flourished. Trade agreements that seemed neutral actually favored human exports. Security arrangements that appeared balanced positioned Earth's defense forces optimally. He had been remaking the game board piece by piece, move by move, unnoticed. The Terrestrial Continuity Council, Sarah said. Who are they? Anthropologists, economists, strategists, politicians, her father replied. People who understood that democracy is too slow when extinction is possible. They've operated for 93 years through 5 ambassador cycles, preparing contingencies official policy could never permit. That's treason. That's survival, he corrected. Treason assumes the state's interests and the species' interests are identical. I've learned they're not. The state concerns itself with quarterly diplomatic victories and short-term stability. The species concerns itself with not dying. Sometimes those align. Sometimes they don't. The council exists for when they don't. Sarah walked to the window, watching dawn break over the UN complex. All of it built on her father's hidden operations, reshaping the geometry of power like a hand beneath the sheet. I have to report this, she said. I know, her father replied calmly. She waited for arguments, justifications. Instead, he simply sat waiting for her to complete the logic chain she had already calculated. If she reported him, official investigation would follow. The council would be exposed. Earth's position in the alliance would be disrupted precisely because her father's covert influence would vanish. Trade agreements would be renegotiated. Security arrangements redrawn. The board would be reset, and Earth would be negotiating from weakness. The diplomatic corps would destabilize. The alliance would question whether other Earth officials worked secretly against official policy. Trust would erode. And during that erosion, the next crisis would arrive. There was always a next crisis. There would be resource conflicts, military skirmishes, economic downturns. When pressure points suddenly materialized, the difference between careful secret planning and reactive desperation would mean survival or extinction. Her father had already run these calculations. That's why he sat calmly, finishing his drink. He knew what she would do because he had raised her to think his way, to prioritize outcomes over rules, to recognize that systems were structures of power requiring rule-breaking to serve their true interests. How much would you need me to do? Sarah asked. Her father set down his glass. That depends. What are you willing to become? Over 6 weeks, Sarah made a choice that would have horrified alternate versions of herself. She continued her diplomatic work, becoming more valuable daily. But now she had a second role, invisible to everyone except her father and 3 council operatives he gradually introduced. She learned to access classified systems without detection. She learned to identify which delegates were operatives or sympathetic. She learned the invisible architecture of power her father had spent decades constructing. She also learned something troubling. She began understanding why her father was right. In the 4th week, a crisis emerged. The VEO delegation announced withdrawal from the mining agreement, providing Earth with rare materials essential for advanced manufacturing. The withdrawal would devastate Earth's economy within 18 months. Through official channels, Earth's position was negotiation and compromise. It would probably work, but would require giving up something valuable, establishing precedent of weakness, signaling Earth could be pressured. But her father had 12 years earlier positioned an ally, a VIOR official named Threshman, into decision-making power. That official reached out through unofficial channels. The situation could be resolved by having Earth quietly support a VIOR faction opposing the withdrawal. This support would tip the political balance. The faction would gain enough power to stop the withdrawal. The VOR government would remain stable, and Earth would obtain something more valuable than the mining agreement, a permanent ruling faction alliance. It was elegant. It was effective. It was also interference in another species' internal politics. What if we're wrong about what they should choose? Sarah asked. We're not wrong, her father said. The faction we're supporting provides more vote stability, which benefits everyone. But we're choosing, Sarah pressed. We're deciding which VOR politicians deserve power based on what benefits humanity. It matters, her father said. That's exactly why we must do it. If we leave alien political decisions entirely to aliens, we lose control over our survival. When survival calculus gets tight enough, that control is the difference between thriving and extinction. Sarah ran the operation as planned. Within 2 weeks, the Vizier faction had enough support to reverse the withdrawal. The mining agreement remained intact. Earth's economy was protected. She also discovered something that shattered her. The faction she supported wasn't actually the better choice for VIOR stability. The opposing faction had superior long-term governance proposals. But her father's faction was better for Earth, and in the calculation she had been trained to make, Earth's interests took absolute precedence. She had become a criminal. Worse, she had become someone who understood why. 3 months into her secret work, Sarah sat in a secure facility beneath the UN complex with the full Terrestrial Continuity Council, 17 brilliant people, welcoming her as though she had always been one of them. Because, they explained, her genetic inheritance and psychological profile had marked her as a candidate since before her birth. Her mother had been Javari, they said. The council had supported her parents' marriage, specifically to create an operative who could understand alien psychology from ground level. Sarah herself had been tracked, monitored, guided toward this exact moment. She was not a person. She was a project. How long? Sarah asked her father after the meeting. Since they met your mother, he said. They encouraged the relationship. They selected your school because they knew you'd need security connections. Every choice was engineered for this. Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not anger, she was too trained to waste emotion on manipulation by a system designed to use her. What she felt was clarity, perfect, cold clarity. Then I should know full operational scope, she said. If I'm going to be effective, I need the complete strategic framework. Her father smiled, a real smile. Yes, he said. You do. In the year that followed, Sarah orchestrated 6 operations advancing Earth's alliance position. She leaked information to sympathetic delegates. She positioned operatives into key roles. She helped orchestrate elections of favorable faction leaders across 3 species. She did all this while maintaining her public persona as a naive young woman whose talent lay in reading alien psychology, while her father remained the steady hand of official Earth diplomacy. By her 29th birthday, Sarah had become the invisible architect of transformation so subtle that no one had noticed it. Earth's position had shifted from precarious to secure. Human interests were protected through official treaties and layers of covert influence, carefully placed operatives, and fundamental restructuring of how power flowed through diplomatic infrastructure. She had also become someone she didn't recognize. The transformation happened so gradually she never identified when she stopped thinking of herself as someone infiltrating a criminal organization and started thinking of herself as an operative with special responsibilities. When she stopped measuring her father's actions against legal standards and started measuring them against outcome standards. when she stopped believing democracy and transparency were actually viable for keeping a species alive. Then came the night when young Priya at the security desk asked, "Does it ever seem like we're the only ones thinking about the future?" Sarah realized she had no one to talk to about what she was doing. Her father was her cooperative in covert action. Council members were her colleagues in secret manipulation. Officials in the diplomatic corps had no idea the ground beneath them had been reshaped. She existed between worlds, unable to return to official policies' comfortable ignorance, unable to move fully into shadowed clarity, unable to speak to anyone who didn't already know what she knew. She understood why her father had recruited her. Not just because she was useful, but because he had been desperately lonely for someone who could understand what he actually was. Now she was that person. Now she could be trusted with the Council's full plans. The complete architecture of Earth's invisible future. The terrifying beauty of a world actually being shaped by people who understood survival's true calculations. It was the most attractive thing she had ever encountered. It was also the most dangerous, because Sarah had inherited something more from her father than his mind and compartmentalization. She had inherited his ability to recognize when logic was leading him towards something unredeemable. And unlike her father, who had chosen covert action when alternatives seemed impossible, Sarah could now choose between futures, becoming exactly what he had become, or exposing the entire system knowing it would destroy their lives and fundamentally weaken humanity's alliance position. The question that paralyzed her was not what she owed to law or institutions. The question was what she owed to the version of herself that had recognized the terrible beauty of power's logic, and to all the other versions of herself she could never be. She stood at a decision point. Every path led to a Sarah Chen she would have to live with forever.